Bill Barr leaned forward, his voice cutting across the chamber like a blade. His words carried accusation, his tone dripping with certainty. Jasmine Crockett was lying. The room stirred, tension rising like static before a storm. Cameras zoomed in. Reporters leaned forward. This wasn't a mere exchange of words. It was a spectacle. But while Barr's voice thundered with power, Crockett's presence radiated something far stronger. She didn't flinch, didn't waver. Instead, she leaned into the microphone, her eyes locked on his, and delivered a line so sharp it sliced through the noise. "Then let's put the evidence on the table right now." The room froze. Gasps echoed softly. Even the relentless hum of live commentary seemed to pause. Barr's attack, designed to rattle and dominate, suddenly hung in the air with nowhere to land. Narrator, this wasn't just an exchange, it was a showdown of power versus proof, intimidation versus integrity. In this moment, the audience wasn't just watching a clash of two voices. They were witnessing the first crack in the armor of a man who thought authority alone could outweigh truth. Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her confidence was louder than Barr's accusations. Every syllable carried the weight of preparation, of law, of unshakable conviction. The chamber could feel it. Something monumental was about to unfold. Because while Barr relied on bluster, Crockett had something he could never manufacture: receipts. And as she reached for the documents that would soon flip the entire hearing upside down, the silence in the room transformed into suspense. Bill Barr wasn't just any accuser. He carried the aura of a former attorney general, a man known for bending the letter of the law to fit the will of a president. His reputation was built not on neutrality but on spinning, protecting Donald Trump at all costs, on reframing facts until they bent into something useful for power. To his supporters, he was the ultimate loyalist. To his critics, he was the master of legal smokescreens. And in this moment, he leaned on that legacy like a weapon, assuming it would intimidate. But Jasmine Crockett was not the kind to be intimidated. Before stepping into Congress, she had stood in the courtroom trenches, fighting for justice as a lawyer. She understood the law, not as an abstract shield for the powerful, but as a tool for the people who couldn't buy their way to protection. That difference mattered. It made her sharp, unflinching, and prepared in ways Barr didn't anticipate. This clash wasn't just about one accusation, one headline, or one heated exchange. It was truth on trial. If Barr could brand Crockett a liar and make it stick, the narrative would shift, painting her as reckless, undermining her credibility, erasing her impact. But if Crockett could turn his accusation back on him, if she could show the receipts that he didn't see coming, the story would flip. And not just for that room, but for millions watching. Narrator, Barr expected his accusation to rattle her. He didn't expect her receipts. The stakes weren't about ego. They were about democracy itself, whether lies could masquerade as authority or whether evidence could still cut through the fog. Crockett's calm wasn't just composure, it was a promise. She was ready to turn this ambush into a reckoning, and the sparks were only beginning to fly. For decades, William Barr cultivated the image of a steady hand, deliberate, cloaked in the gravitas of legal authority. But beneath that calm exterior lay a different truth. Barr had become the ultimate enforcer for power, a man whose skill wasn't in defending justice, but in bending it. He framed himself as a protector of the Constitution, yet time and again, he was accused of twisting the law to shield those in the highest offices from accountability. His defining moment came during the Mueller investigation. The nation held its breath, waiting for clarity on Russian interference and Trump's potential obstruction of justice. And then came Barr, stepping to the podium, spinning a 400-page report into a 4-page memo that downplayed its most damning findings. What the report called troubling, Barr called exoneration. What investigators flagged as obstruction, Barr dismissed as politics. The media later accused him of deliberately misleading the public, but by then the damage was done. Barr had given Trump the headline he wanted. No collusion, no obstruction. It wasn't the only time. From defending the president's deployment of federal agents against protesters to interfering in cases involving Trump allies, Barr's record became a blueprint for loyalty over law. To many, he wasn't the Attorney General of the United States, he was the Attorney General of Donald Trump. His critics saw him as a man willing to trade the integrity of the Justice Department for the favor of one man. And yet, Barr wielded this reputation with confidence. He knew that when he spoke, people listened. His authority carried weight. His words could shape headlines, steer narratives, drown out dissent. That was his power, not in proving truth, but in obscuring it. Narrator, a man who built his legacy on bending the law, was about to be bent by it. Because standing across from Barr wasn't another politician who feared his gravitas. It was Jasmine Crockett, a lawyer who knew the law not as theater but as weapon, who had sharpened her skills in real battles for justice. Barr had spent his career controlling the frame, but this time the frame itself was shifting, and his authority, his most trusted weapon, was about to be turned against him. Jasmine Crockett's story doesn't begin in the marble halls of Washington. It begins in the heart of Texas, where grit, resilience, and community defined her path long before politics ever did. Raised in a world where opportunity was often withheld from those who looked like her, Crockett learned early that justice wasn't a guarantee, it was something you had to fight for. Her love for the law grew not from a desire for prestige, but from witnessing injustice up close. As a young black woman, she felt the sting of being underestimated, of having to work twice as hard to be taken half as seriously. But instead of letting that burden crush her, she turned it into fuel. She pursued law not to sit in boardrooms or chase corporate power, but to stand in the trenches, defending the marginalized, the overlooked, the silenced. Crockett built her practice on community defense. She fought for clients who couldn't afford high-powered attorneys, who walked into courtrooms with the odds stacked against them. For her, each case wasn't just about statutes and procedures. It was about dignity. It was about proving that the law could be more than a weapon wielded by the powerful. It could be a shield for the vulnerable. That commitment carried her into activism, where she became known for her unapologetic voice. She didn't soften her words to make them palatable. She spoke directly, sharply, cutting through the noise, with the precision of someone who had seen injustice up close and refused to let it stand. Her rise to Congress was never inevitably, was hard-fought. A story of persistence in the face of systemic barriers that were designed to keep people like her on the sidelines. In Washington, Crockett quickly built a reputation as more than just another politician. She was a lawyer's lawyer, grounded in facts, fluent in the language of justice, unwilling to be bullied into silence. Where others bent under pressure, she stood taller. Where others sought compromise to avoid conflict, she leaned into confrontation when the stakes demanded it. And yet, her boldness wasn't reckless. It was rooted in something deeper, a belief that the truth, delivered clearly and courageously, could pierce through even the most elaborate deceptions. This made her not just a representative of her district, but a symbol of something larger, the fight for fairness in a system, often rigged by insiders. Contrast her journey with Bill Barr's. He was the consummate insider, a man groomed in elite institutions, climbing his way into the most powerful rooms of government through connections and loyalty. Crockett was the opposite. She rose not because she was handed opportunity, but because she refused to be denied it. Where Barr represented establishment power, Crockett represented people power. Where Barr wielded legalese to obscure the truth, Crockett wielded the law to expose it. And so, when their worlds collide, his bluster against her clarity, his insider privilege against her community grit, the clash was more than personal. It was generational. It was systemic. It was America's story of who gets to define truth, who gets to shape justice, and whose voices refuse to be silenced. Bill Barr leaned forward, his voice rising with the kind of force meant to intimidate. "You are twisting the facts, Congresswoman," he thundered, jabbing a finger into the air. "The record shows clear inconsistencies in your claims, and frankly, the American people deserve honesty, not theatrics." His words reverberated across the chamber, meant to drown out dissent through sheer volume. But Jasmine Crockett didn't flinch. She let the echo of his accusation hang in the air, her silence cutting sharper than any immediate reply. Reporters in the gallery leaned forward, pens scratching against paper, waiting for her to break. Viewers online flooded the chat. "Stay calm, Jasmine. Don't let him steamroll you." The tension was electric. Then, with a measured calm, Crockett spoke. "Mr. Barr, volume does not equal truth, and accusations do not equal evidence." The words landed like precision strikes, each one dismantling the bluster he had built. Barr scowled, flipping through his notes as if the right page could rescue him. He pressed harder. "You're misleading this body. You're misleading the American people." His voice cracked at the edges, frustration bleeding into his tone. Gasps rippled through the room, not at his words, but at the desperation behind them. Crockett paused, letting silence sharpen into a blade. Then she countered, "Let's be very clear. I'm not here to play games with the truth. Every statement I've made is documented, every fact verifiable. You can shout all you want, but shouting doesn't erase reality." The chamber stirred. Some smirked, others exchanged wide-eyed glances. Online hashtags began to spark. Hashtag truth over noise. Hashtag Crockett vs. Barr. It wasn't just a debate anymore. It was a spectacle. A battle of noise versus proof unfolding in real time. Barr's face reddened. As he doubled down once more, his words tumbling over each other in a desperate attempt to reclaim control. But Crockett stayed still, calm, unshaken, until the moment his rant collapsed under its own weight. And then, with devastating simplicity, she reached for the stack of documents at her side. "If we're going to argue about facts, then let's actually look at them." She lifted the folder, her eyes locked on Barr. Narrator, every time Barr pressed harder, Crockett's silence sharpened into a blade. And then she dropped the documents that froze Barr mid-sentence. Jasmine Crockett leaned forward, her hands steady as she lifted the folder into view. She didn't raise her voice, she didn't rush. She simply opened the file and began. "Let's go line by line, Mr. Barr. Not with my words, but with yours." The chamber hushed. Reporters froze mid-scribble, cameras zoomed closer, and even Barr's allies shifted uneasily in their seats. Crockett flipped to the first page. "On June 14th, during your testimony before the Judiciary Committee, you stated that the findings of the Mueller report did not establish obstruction of justice, yet she paused, letting the tension stretch. In the same report, under your own Department of Justice, there are explicit references to at least 10 separate instances of possible obstruction. Murmurs swept across the room. Barr's eyes flickered down to his notes, then back up, his jaw tightening. He tried to interject, but Crockett raised a hand, lightly not commanding, but resolute. "I'll continue, Mr. Barr. We'll get to your defense in due time." She turned another page. July 2020, you gave an interview where you said the DOJ acted without political bias. But here, she held up a printed memo. We have your own correspondence, directing staff to intervene in a sentencing recommendation for Roger Stone, a Trump ally. That's not my interpretation. That's your signature. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Online, the hashtags detonated like fireworks. Hashtag Crockett destroys Barr. Hashtag receipts over rhetoric. Hashtag truth on paper. Comment feeds exploded with emojis, cheers, and disbelief at how calmly she laid down evidence that Barr had spent years dodging. Crockett's delivery was slow, deliberate, like a surgeon cutting with precision. She read dates, quoted lines verbatim, then placed each document down on the table in front of her, building a tower of undeniable proof. Every pause made the room lean in closer. Every citation made Barr's defenses crumble. Barr attempted to respond, his voice faltering. "Well, Congresswoman, the context," but Crockett cut in smoothly, not harshly, but with piercing clarity. Context doesn't erase contradiction. Context doesn't rewrite signatures. And context doesn't explain why your public statements repeatedly deny what your own documents confirm. The chamber buzzed again. Barr's trademark composure slipped, his words stumbling as he tried to pivot. But the more he fumbled, the stronger Crockett's presence became. Then she delivered the line that turned the showdown into a mic drop moment. She closed the folder, leaned back slightly, and said with unflinching calm, "Mr. Barr, this isn't my opinion, it's your own record speaking against you." Silence, pure, heavy silence. Barr's mouth opened, but no words came out. The cameras captured every twitch, every second of his collapse under the weight of his own history. Narrator, it wasn't a rebuttal. It was an unmasking. Years of spin unraveled in minutes, undone not by volume, but by receipts. The audience in the gallery exchanged wide-eyed looks, some even nodding in disbelief. Online, the digital chorus swelled louder. She cooked. Him alive. Receipts greater than rhetoric. Memes began to circulate in real time. Screenshots of Crockett's calm face with captions like "Dignity doesn't shout, it shines." Barr leaned back, visibly shaken. His authority, once his most trusted weapon, had been turned against him in front of millions. And Crockett hadn't just defended herself. She had exposed him, layer by layer, until the image of invincibility he carried was nothing but smoke. The moment Jasmine Crockett's words echoed through the chamber, the internet detonated. Within minutes, clips of her dismantling Bill Barr flooded Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube. The hashtags rose like a digital chorus. Hashtag Crockett destroys Barr. Hashtag receipts over rhetoric. Hashtag truth on paper. Memes spread faster than fact-checkers could keep up side-by-side images of Crockett coolly presenting documents against Barr fumbling with his notes. Captions reading, "She didn't just win, she demolished him." Progressive media wasted. No time, MSNBC ran the clip on repeat, anchors calling it the defining takedown of the year. CNN framed it, as a watershed moment. A young congresswoman standing tall against the once untouchable enforcer of Trump's Justice Department. Op-eds praised her mastery of law, her poise under fire, and her ability to cut through years of Barr's spin with nothing more than facts and patience. Meanwhile, conservative outlets scrambled. Fox News anchors fumbled to reframe the exchange, insisting Barr had been ambushed or misunderstood. Commentators tried to dismiss Crockett's evidence as selective, but even their viewers knew the optics told another story. Every defense rang hollow against the viral images of Barr's stunned silence. The once powerful figure looked less like a master strategist and more like a man caught in the web of his own contradictions. But it wasn't just media elites who were reacting. Across the country, ordinary peoples, students, lawyers, activists shared the clip as inspiration. Young women of color saw themselves in Crockett, poised, unshakable, fearless. In group chats and campus meetings, the conversation shifted. If she can stand up to Barr, I can stand up in my classroom, my courtroom, my workplace. Activist groups amplified her moment as a rallying cry. Legal aid organizations replayed the footage at fundraising events, showing donors what courage in Congress could look like. Progressive influencers stitched the video into TikToks, urging followers to demand leaders who carried receipts, not rhetoric. The ripple was unmistakable. Crockett had given voice to a generation weary of gaslighting and hungry for truth, backed by proof. For Barr, the fallout was brutal. Editorial cartoons painted him as a man drowning in his own paperwork, while Crockett stood calmly above. Late-night hosts roasted his failed bravado, joking that Bill Barr just got impeached by a binder. His defenders grew fewer by the hour, drowned out by the roar of digital applause for Crockett's composure. Narrator, but beyond the memes, beyond the hashtags, something deeper was happening. This wasn't just a viral takedown, it was a cultural shift, a reminder that dignity can shine brighter than spin, and that courage, when armed with truth, can ripple far beyond one chamber. Jasmine Crockett didn't let the moment end with her victory. She leaned forward, her voice calm but firm, and reframed the confrontation in a way that made it bigger than herself. "This isn't me versus Bill Barr," she said. "This is truth versus lies. This is integrity versus corruption. This is about whether the American people can trust those who claim to serve them more, whether spin will keep winning over substance." The chamber grew quiet, as though even the air was listening. What had started as a sparring match between two figures now felt like a referendum on something larger, the very soul of public service. Crockett wasn't claiming glory for herself. She was holding up a mirror to the nation, asking everyone to decide what kind of country they wanted to be. The crescendo built slowly, like the swell of a rising tide. "We have to choose," she continued, "between leaders who weaponize fear and those who carry facts, between those who bend the law to serve power and those who serve power by upholding the law, between those who erase voices and those who amplify them." Her words carried beyond the chamber, echoing in living rooms and on phone screens across America. People felt it because it wasn't just about politics. It was about the values that bind a society. America wasn't choosing between politicians. It was choosing between empathy and cruelty, between law and lawlessness, between representation and the rot of elitism. Narrator, this was the universal truth embedded in Crockett's stand: courage. And evidence can silence even the most powerful accusers. Power can shout, but it cannot erase paper trails. Arrogance can sneer, but it collapses under the weight of facts. And dignity quiet, steady, unwavering, dignity always outshines bluster. For millions watching, the message landed deeper than a political jab. It was validation proof that the system, however broken, could still produce leaders who would not be bullied, leaders who spoke for those who had long been silenced. Crockett became not just a congresswoman in that moment, but a symbol of resilience for those who had been told they didn't belong in the halls of power. And then came her closing words, measured, unshakable, unforgettable, in that moment. Millions were reminded evidence doesn't shout, it stands unshaken. The chamber didn't erupt in noise this time. It sat in silence, the kind that follows when the truth has been spoken so clearly that no rebuttal can rise against it. Narrator, and with that, history leaned away from the man who had built a career on bending the law, and toward the woman who showed that the law, when wielded with courage, could bend the arc of justice back toward the people. Bill Barr accused Jasmine Crockett of lying, but when she dropped the evidence that destroyed his attack, the story flipped. The man who once wielded authority as a shield was stripped of it in real time, and the woman he tried to silence became the voice millions rallied behind. This wasn't just a clash between two people. It was a reminder that in the battle between accusations and facts, only truth endures. Barr came armed with bluster. Crockett came armed with proof. And in the end, history will always remember who stood unshaken. Narrator, because when evidence speaks, lies crumble. When courage holds steady, fear falters. And when dignity faces corruption, dignity wins. Now the question is what we do with that truth. If you believe facts deserve to be louder than if you believe voices like Jasmine Crockett's should echo far beyond one hearing, then join us. Subscribe to this channel, share this story, and let's make sure that integrity never stands alone.